10. Emily Counter. In 2019, 21-year-old Emily Counter was using the rowing machine at a gym on Australia's Sunshine Coast when she suddenly had a seizure and collapsed backwards. She started turning blue as the gym's owner, Aaron Peterson, and gym member Ben Duffy used a defibrillator to restart her heart. Even after the men performed the life-saving first aid, Emily was in dire need of emergency treatment. She was rushed to the hospital and spent 3 days in a coma. During her stay, doctors diagnosed her with a rare heart condition called Bland White Garland Syndrome, BWGS. Roughly 1 in every 300,000 births are affected by it, and it's almost always fatal without medical intervention during infancy. Emily was extremely fortunate to have survived 20 years with the condition that she was totally unaware of. Long before the incident, she started getting heart pains and struggled with her breathing when she ran. But she just assumed that she was in poor shape and that more exercising would alleviate her symptoms. After discovering Emily's condition, doctors performed the work that she needed done on her heart to make it healthy. She can now exercise without restrictions, but the outcome might have been much different if there was no defibrillator on hand when she fell unconscious. Since then, she said that she thinks all Australian gyms should be required to have the life-saving device available for emergency use. 9. Melissa Lawrie. During a vacation to Mexico last year, 28-year-old British twin sisters Melissa and Georgia Lawrie took a nighttime swim in the bioluminescent waters of Manialtepec Lagoon. Georgia suddenly heard someone screaming and called out for Melissa among their tour group, but she didn't respond. Something had dragged her underwater. Using her diving and life-saving experience, Georgia dove in search of her sister and found her face down on the surface a few minutes later. Melissa had been attacked by a crocodile. The ferocious reptile struck again as Georgia tried pulling her to their boat. In her attempts to get the creature to let go of its grip on her twin, she punched it repeatedly in the head. Georgia managed to get Melissa to the boat, but she was left with life-threatening injuries, including water in her lungs. Her foot was barely attached to her body, and doctors feared that they would have to amputate it. She also developed sepsis and was put into a medically induced coma. Surgeons managed to save Melissa's foot, and she came out of the coma after a few days. She later told the press that she barely remembers the incident, although Georgia remembers it very well. And while Melissa has physically recovered, both sisters now struggle with PTSD, and Georgia still has nightmares about the horrific incident. 8. Capsized kayakers. While vacationing in Nova Scotia recently, a mother and daughter from Toronto rented a kayak near the town of Digby. The business owner who rented the boat to the pair insisted that they put their cell phones in a waterproof container. Their decision to take his advice would later prove to be life-saving. They went a little further out onto the water than they should have during the excursion. Soon enough, winds picked up and knocked the duo out of the kayak. The daughter managed to get back into the boat, but Mum was unable to and remained stranded in the water. Because their cell phones were dry thanks to the case that the kayak owner had urged them to use, they were able to call 911 and a rescue soon got underway. Even though the pair called for help right away, they were still in danger as they waited for emergency responders to arrive. Volunteer firefighter Johnny Amaro was working at his day job at a local wharf when he received a page for the rescue call. He knew that the fire department would respond with its own boat, but that it might take longer for them to reach the kayakers. Amaro and 2 co-workers, Jaden Lent and Morgan Graham, hopped onto their workboat and headed out onto the open water in search of the paddlers. By the time the men reached them over a mile from shore, the mother had been in the frigid water for about 45 minutes and was talkative but was quickly losing feeling in her lower body. Amaro later told Saltwire reporter Aaron Beswick that the daughter was clearly in shock from the ordeal and didn't say much. Luckily, neither of them were injured. A relative posted a statement on social media thanking the rescuers for their help and pointing out how things may have turned out much differently if the women's phones hadn't been in a waterproof case. The men who sprang into action to save them were praised by their employer in a social media post, thanking them for their quick action. 7. Haley Morinico. When 17-year-old Haley Morinico's 5 dogs started barking and ran out into her backyard in Britain last year, she went to see what all the fuss was about and noticed a mother bear and her 2 cubs walking along a wall that surrounds the yard. Without a second thought, Morinico ran outside and shoved the bear in an attempt to protect the dogs. While black bears aren't usually aggressive, it's another story when it comes to a mother protecting her cubs, and the bear that entered Haley's yard was snapping at her dogs. The teen scrambled to grab her dog Valentina away from the bear and to get her other pets inside. Luckily for her, she was only left with a sprained finger and some scrapes, and Valentina also only had minor injuries. Footage of the split-second rescue went viral, landing Haley and her mother an interview on Good Morning Britain. She said that she reacted so fast to the sight of the bear threatening her dogs that it didn't register in her mind that she herself was in any real danger until after she pushed the bear. While she's lucky the outcome wasn't worse, her quick thinking most likely saved her dogs' lives. 6. Fallon O'Regan. A young man named Fallon O'Regan was about to go to bed one night recently when a bright light caught his eye from outside. He looked out onto his porch and realized that it was a fire. Fallon rushed out of his multi-unit home and realized that the families living on the upper floor wouldn't be able to get out because the fire was in the path of their exit. Knowing that they'd get hurt by jumping out windows, the teen and one of his downstairs neighbors started looking for things they could use to help people get to the ground safely. The pair pushed a trampoline from nearby to the windows that the families would have to jump from. First, the residents threw their pets down onto the trampoline. Fallon later told ABC6 that the residents were scared and that it took some coaxing to get them to jump. After about 10 minutes of encouragement, they entrusted the young men, who are now being credited with saving lives. 3 people were hospitalized for smoke inhalation. In a tearful interview right after the fire, the teen's mother, Becky Williams, said that she's proud of her son for taking action and thinking of others, especially knowing that the family had likely lost their own pets. 5. An unlikely hero. 7-year-old Messiah Brown was swimming with his family outside his apartment complex in Sacramento recently when he saw an unresponsive toddler underwater in the 6-foot-deep pool. The second grader told his 9-year-old cousin about the child, and she encouraged Messiah, who learned to swim at a very young age, to save him. He jumped into the pool, swam to the little boy, and pulled him to the surface. Messiah's cousin also helped to get the 3-year-old out of the water. The pair took the unresponsive boy to his mother and someone started performing CPR. He was taken to the hospital in critical condition, but has since made a miraculous recovery according to his mother, who spoke with ABC News. In the meantime, Messiah and his cousin told an adult family member about what had happened. His proud father, former Olympic boxer Marcus Brown, said that he couldn't believe how his son acted so heroically, adding, "He's a good kid." 4. Chrissy White. 23-year-old Chrissy White was at her waitressing job in DeKalb County, Georgia recently when a gunman suddenly opened fire inside the restaurant. She later told Fox 5 Atlanta that she was really scared, but she focused on remaining calm as everyone dropped to the floor or ran for cover. Chrissy has no medical training, but when she saw one of the victims in a state of shock with blood spurting from his neck, she knew she had to do something to stem the bleeding. She applied pressure to the wound with her bare hand while using the other hand to dial 911 and stayed beside the man until emergency responders arrived. In the meantime, customers detained the gunman, who shot another victim in the knee while they were attempting to get him under control. The victim survived and spent a few days in the hospital. When he was released, he contacted Chrissy's employer in search of the young woman, whom he wanted to thank for helping him in the middle of a chaotic and terrifying situation. He told Fox 5 Atlanta that he isn't comfortable speaking on camera yet, but said through a text message that he's certain that Chrissy saved his life and that he's grateful. Chrissy said that she feels really good about helping the man, and that the situation has inspired her to think about furthering her education and pursuing a career as an EMT. 3. Marcus Personette. While searching a suspect's vehicle recently in South Carolina, Huntsville Police Corporal Marcus Personette and Sergeant Riley Free found some white powder. The suspect claimed the substance was cocaine. While transferring the evidence, Sergeant Free became ill and started to fall unconscious. He had unknowingly come into contact with fentanyl. Just a tiny amount of the drug can be deadly, even when absorbed through the skin and not ingested directly. Free was able to call out to Corporal Personette for help and radioed for an ambulance as his condition worsened. While they waited for help to arrive, Personette administered 4 doses of Narcan, a life-saving opioid antidote that many departments in the US have started carrying in recent years amid the ongoing drug crisis throughout the country. Free was admitted to the hospital for further observation, but survived thanks to his colleague, who wasted no time administering the Narcan, knowing that it could mean the difference between life and death. He quickly recovered and was soon back to work. 2. Shane Stevens. While performing a minor surgical procedure on a calf, like he'd done many times before throughout his 30-year career as a ranch manager in Dumble, Texas, Bill Rofan suddenly found himself with a life-threatening injury. The calf moved its leg unexpectedly, causing the scalpel in his hand to slide across part of his hand. Rofan later told local station KHOU that he thought some paper towels might help stem the bleeding, but they quickly became soaked. When his 16-year-old ranch hand Shane Stevens saw how bad the bleeding was, he knew it was more serious than his boss had initially assumed. Stevens, who trains with Texas Special Forces, could tell that Rofan had cut a major artery and ran to his truck for a first aid kit. Using his medical training, he applied a tourniquet to the manager's arm and drove him to a nearby medical facility. From there, Rofan was taken by ambulance to a different hospital, where a hand surgeon stitched his artery back together. A doctor told him that it could have taken just 3 to 5 minutes for him to bleed out. Knowing how much worse things could have turned out if Shane hadn't been around that day, Rofan credits his young employee with saving his life. 1. Rig Trio. Forest fires are a regular problem in some parts of the world, and they're becoming a bigger issue elsewhere as global temperatures rise. A wildfire recently broke out near Dayton, Montana, and quickly burned over 16,000 acres. As the blaze spread, homeowner Rig Trio grew increasingly concerned about his 125-acre property. When he noticed the wind shift and the flames start approaching his land, he knew he had to act fast. He later told NBC Montana that the blaze got so hot it felt like a blowtorch to the face. Rick and his cousin went straight to work, cutting fire lines with their skid loader and bulldozer, effectively stopping the fire before it could encroach any further onto the property. He managed to spare most of his land from destruction. After getting the flames around his own yard under control, the men cut fire lines for their neighbors' properties. They kept going until they cut so many miles of fire lines that they couldn't keep track of how much work they'd done. Rick's good deed not only saved his own home and land, but several of his neighbors' houses as well. Cheryl Hunt, who lives nearby but had never met Rick before, told NBC that she's incredibly grateful to him for saving her home and everything she owns. Thanks for watching. Would you rather risk your life trying to save someone from drowning in a fast-moving river, or try to wrestle an armed burglar to the floor during a bank robbery? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. See you next time. Bye.